Hey everybody, this is a follow-up for my Intro to Animation class, and we were setting up your homework and we were talking about creating a little traffic pattern like we did in class the other day. But in case anybody was scratching their head, I figured I'd put up a little video for you, and basically it was pretty straightforward. We started with some primitives, and the first primitive was up here in the Create menu, and we went to Polygon Primitives, and we created a plane. Depending on what your defaults are, your plane may be tiny in different size than mine, but in my case, my plane creation is set up for a width of 10 and a height of 10 and 2 subdivisions. Very likely yours might be set up to something like this, 1 and maybe 10 and 10, so it's sort of showing up like that. Which is a little bit more than we need. So in that case, again, what you'd want to do is you can go in here and you can just make that bigger, something like 20, and you might want to make these 3 by 3. So you can do like I'm doing and just highlight both of these by left clicking and dragging down and entering a number, or you can just enter number 1 and then enter a second number. Alrighty, so here's our basic street geometry, and we can hit F5. I'm going to get rid of our grid, and there you go. There's a little button right up here in each viewport, and that hides our grid. We can also go up to display, and we can turn off the grid in there. Okay, either way works fine. What we're going to do is do a little extrusion to turn this into a cool little sidewalk and street situation. So if we right click on the model, we get access to the subcomponents, edges, vertices, faces, such like that. In our case, we want at 6 o'clock faces, right? So we can hold down the shift key and select the faces that we want, which are kind of going to be the street faces, right? Then we have two options. We can go to edit mesh and go to extrude and do it that way, or if I select those guys again, we can hold down shift and right click and get to the extrude that way, which is the exact same thing. Alright, so let me just undo this to make sure I don't have any extrudes on there. So I'm going to hold down shift and go to the extrude, and in this case all I'm going to do is pull that down just a little bit like that. Don't want to pull it down much, doesn't need to be. Alright. Now the only problem clearly with our street would be your car would hit those little extra faces on the edge. So what we can do is just run our mouse over each one of these and then tap the delete key, just like that. And there you go, there's our street. Now if you're adventurous and you want to extend your street a little bit, you could do this. Once again, right click on the object and let's go to edge. Okay, so now as opposed to faces, we're selecting edges, and we can select this outer edge and double click it. What that's going to do is select the edge ring all the way around. Two different ways we could do that. We could select them individually and hold down shift and basically just work our way around if you prefer that. I can't imagine you would. Or just grab one of the end edges like that, and that'll select all the edges around. Okie dokie. So in our case, that's going to work out fine. What we did here was extrude existing faces down, but in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to extrude edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the shift key, right click, and again, I have the option down here, but now to extrude edges like that, which is kind of cool. And just to make it easy, all I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the offset button and just extrude that out, something like that. Maybe like 20, 30 units, something like that. It doesn't make any difference really, but there you go. So now, if I right click on it and go back to object mode, I got like a cool little street that extends in both directions. Okay. Now to dress it up just a little bit, what we can do is we can actually assign materials, or, well, Maya by default assigns material to this object, and by default it's called Lambert 1, and the easiest way we can see that or play with that, although we wouldn't normally want to, let's go over here to the attribute editor, which is this little editor right here on the side. Okay, and what we can do is you see all these tabs, and these are construction tabs. As a matter of fact, here's our extrude, and it's got all those delete faces that we did, and a lot of the stuff we want to clean up by deleting the history. So it's sort of like the history of everything you've done to this object. Okay, so at the very end, you're going to see a tab called Lambert 1. This is the default material that Maya assigns to everything. Anything that Maya creates is created, and it's basically just this gray material. Okay, so normally we leave it as such because this is just what Maya uses by default. If you change it, everything that Maya creates will be changed by default. So we'll show you that real quick. Right, let's say you were like, I want to make this a red material, which is kind of blinding. Then if you did something like go to the Create menu and create a sphere like this, you'll notice that your sphere is now created red, which is probably not what you want. So in that case, all I'm going to do is go back to it's your center gray, so leave Lambert 1 alone. Okay, so I'm going to grab that sphere, just tap the delete key. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two materials for my little street scene. I'm going to right-click on the object, and just as a shortcut, because it's easy, I'm going to then scroll down here past Assign New Material, which will work great. But in our case, just for shortness sake, we're going to go Assign Favorite Material. And this is just sort of like a quick drop-down list of the most commonly used materials and shader types in Maya. In our case, we're just going to assign a Lambert shader. You may say, well, that's not particularly exciting looking. It looks just like Lambert 1. Well, yeah, but it's not Lambert 1. So we can modify this one, and it won't screw up every other thing that you're going to create in Maya. So in this situation, maybe we'll just make it like a little bit darker. Not quite that dark, but you know, maybe something like, we'll leave it like that. That's fine. Okay. So now this is all Lambert 1, and we can even change the name of it up here. And I'm just going to call this sidewalk. So this is going to be the sidewalk material. As a matter of fact, I should call it _MAT. So that way, if I named this thing, you would say, well, this is clearly a material and not an object. Okay. So what we'd also then want to do is potentially add something that looks more like asphalt to two streets. Okay, so well, we can't do it on the object level, but once again, what we can do is we can right-click on the object, go into Faces, and let's just select all these faces all the way down. Right? I'm going to hold down Shift and select those faces. So this is pretty much everything that would be asphalt. Okay. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to go back down to Assign Favorite Material, and I'm going to select Lambert again. Okay, you might say, well, it's not particularly exciting, but now it's Lambert 3. So in this case, what we can do is we can either by the slider take this down, something like that, much darker, or you can just pick one of the color swatches in here, something like that. Okay, so in that case then, now I'm just going to drag up, right-click to Object Mode, and I have my object. So in this case, what we got, if I rotate around, holding down the Alt or Option key if you're like me on a Mac, you got a cool little sidewalk. Okay, so that looks kind of neat. All right, so that's the beginning, and you could, you know, put additional cubes here as buildings or something like that. So if you wanted to do that, you could create a, let's say, a cube, and we could tap the R key to scale it out. Grab these or something with that vein, and W, let's say, slide this into place over here. Don't even know if it's on the bottom. It's probably not. No, it's floating on the top. What you might want to do, well, I'm not going to bother with that right now. So we might do that. Just sit this in the corner. As if this was a building. You might want to make it even bigger than that, but that's fine for now. So there's maybe one building. I'm going to hold down Control D and maybe make another building over here. As a matter of fact, what we can do is we can right-click on the object, grab its vertices, and I might want to select these in the front. make this a bigger building, grab these vertices on the top, bring this up, so it's sort of like a skyscraper sort of a building, but you get the idea. What you could do here is where the back object mode is. You could dress up your scene a little bit, and as the weeks come on, I'll show you a little bit more about making a more detailed sidewalk to it and such, but the point of it was more to get you guys kind of warmed up inside of Maya. So the next thing we talked about was having traffic kind of coming down this way and traffic coming this way. All right. So since we're going to be talking about animation, we're going to need our time slider, which is going to be down here on the bottom. Depending if you're in Maya 2015 or 14, by 14 it defaults to 24 frames on the slider, 48 frames for the project, which is only 2 seconds, so that's not going to be particularly good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend our project a little bit to something like 200 frames, something like that. And I'm going to just say, let's look at 200 frames and do something like that. So now, as you see, we got nice 200 frames to work with. Okay, so let's make like just little simple polygonal traffic. I'm going to make a polygon box, and here's my box. What I'm going to do with my box is just drag it up. There's ways to change where the pivot point is so it sits on the curve and everything, but for right now, we'll get there. Beginning of the yellow brick road. What I'm more interested in is that you have the representation of a car. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just moving it to one side because we might have traffic coming down the other side. Okay. In this case, what I'll probably do is I'm going to grab its manipulator and just kind of stick this down here, something like that. Okay. And if you wanted to, without having to create another box, you could just duplicate this box to send it the other way. So we'll do that for one. I'm going to do a Control D. All right. And so I'll just move this box over like this and drag this box all the way down here. Okay. So now I have two boxes. And you might be noticing this is a tremendously gray scene. You can certainly change that. And we will. As a matter of fact, if you want, we can do it now. We're going to select one of these boxes, and I'm going to right-click on it. As a matter of fact, what we'll do is, yeah, this is easy for now. I'm going to go down to Assign Favorite Material, and we'll just do a blend this time, which is basically the difference between a Lambert and a blend. Very simply is that you can get a highlight or a shininess with a blend. And there's far more to it than that, but that'll do for now. And I'm going to make it red. Okay? So this is going to be red. It's a blend, so we can call this red blend. Okay, so that material is a red blend. The object itself, though, is still just called P cube. Okay? So if we went to the channel box over here, you can see there's his name, P cube. You could see that if we opened up the outliner, there he is there, he's P cube. If you wanted to change this, we could double click on that and call him red car. So now we can just pull him out from all these other objects in here. We're going to select this guy over here. I'm going to right click on him. I'm going to assign a favorite material. I'm going to give him a blend as well. And in this case, we'll make him blue. And then what we'll do is we'll call this a blue blend. Okay. As far as the name of the object goes, let's change that too. I'm going to double tap the name right over there in the outliner and call this blue car. Okay. So there's two cars like that. So as far as the animating goes, animating in Maya is pretty straightforward. It's simple enough. We could once again bring up our channel box. We have the option to bring up our channel box by clicking on the tab over here between these two. Okay. Or we could just hold down Control and tap A, and that'll flip between those two editors. The channel box is great because it shows you the name of the car, gives you access to all its transforms, and if it was created as a parametric object, like these cubes were, it gives you the ability to change their subdivisions and width and height and such like that. But these size for now is going to be just fine. Okay. And the outliner is sort of just the index or the table of contents of your scene. Okay, I mean, we could and should, if we were actually making a real project, name these building 1, building 2. This would be named, you know, street. As a matter of fact, we could name it to that. Street. Okay, so as you start naming your objects, naming your materials, your scene starts to take on a more logical feel. So everything just starts to make more sense. It's far easier for me to find the blue car as opposed to if everything was named cube. I can just go, aha, there's the blue car. And what material is it that I put on the blue car? Well, I can hold down Control A, tap over here, and I could see, well, clearly I have a blue blend on the car. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, let's just do a little bit of animation right now. So as far as animating goes, I'm going to once again hold down Control, tap A to get back to my channel box. Offset of the traffic is going to be pretty straightforward. The traffic, what we're going to do is have this car going this way, this car going this way, basically at the exact same time, and we'll start there. So we're going to be running at 24 frames per second. If we take our cursor and we come down here and we click on the project, we can actually see that our playback time under time slider is set to real-time 24, and that our project working units is set to 24 frames per second. That's default in Maya, so that should be fine. What I'm going to do is take the blue car right now, and just for the sake of how I showed you in class the other day, I'm going to tap S. Okay, S will keyframe that car at its current frame that we're looking at, which is frame 1. Everything is keyframed. This is sort of like keyframe with an exclamation point, but it works. Okay, so if at 24 frames per second we wanted this object to come down here and spend 10 seconds to get to this end, how many frames would we need? 240 frames. Okay, if I wanted it to take 5 seconds, half of that would be 120 frames, okay, which is far handier for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my time slider to 120. Then I'm going to grab this axis on this car and slide him all the way down here, just like that, okay? And in this case, what I'm going to do is tap S. Now, you may have noticed that it already set a keyframe for me when I did that automatically. That is because I had auto key turned on. We didn't discuss auto key, but it's a handy little tool, and you're welcome to experiment with that as well. The only caveat with auto key is that the initial key you have to set manually, because if you move an object with auto key and there isn't a key or a keyframe placed already, it won't place a keyframe for you. Okay? So anyway, there's the blue car, and if we hit play, blue car does just what you'd want. It takes 5 seconds to get to that end. Okay? Now let's do the same with the red car. Here is the red car. I'm going to keyframe it differently though, a little bit more efficiently. What I'm going to do with the red car is I'm going to look at what axis I'm moving him on. And if you look up in my channel box, we can see that he's going to be moving on the x-axis only. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my time slider back to frame 1. I'm going to click on Translate X, right click, and then key selected. Okay? So that will key just that key. As a matter of fact, for a moment, I'm going to turn off auto key. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move again to frame 120, and I am going to move this guy all the way down here. Okay, no key has been set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back up here to Translate X, and I'm going to say key selected. And now you can see that there is a keyframe set. So between these two, if I slide back to 1 and hit the play button, not particularly exciting, but we have control, which is good. It's exactly what we want. Okay? So we have traffic moving in 2 different cars, 2 different directions, but not particularly interesting at this point, so let's just sort of juice it up a little bit. I need another car. So what I'm going to do is go up to the Create menu, going to go down to Polygonal Primitive, and again notice that when I click on cube, it just gives me a cube because I have my interactive creation turned off. This is on by default when you install Maya. If you like it, good for you. I just like to say I want a cube, and I get a cube. That makes my life so much better. Okay, so here's my cube. And currently he's going to be going right down the middle of the street, which I don't want. I'm going to put him over here to one side. So there you go. We're going to make him a green car. Okay, so what I'm going to do, once again, and we can do this different ways. Like I said, once you're a little bit more comfortable, I'm going to show you well, I can show you right now, actually. It's not a big deal. I'm going to right-click on it, and that first option that we had down here, which was Assign New Material, if I click on that, it opens up this window, and you might be like, whoa, what kind of window is this? This is a tremendously scary window, and it really isn't. It gives me an option for materials, which is sort of like that hot list under favorites. In our case, blend will work fine. If we were modeling or animating hair tube shaders have a different way of playing with light. Ocean shaders, surface shaders, background shaders, there's all sorts of stuff. But again, all of these are available to you, but they're normally not the go-to materials in Maya. That's why that assign favorite material list is kind of handy, because normally blends, Fongs, Lamberts, those are your go-to materials. So in our case, we're just going to tap blend. And there you go. Now it has a blend material on it. And in this case, I'm going to click on the color swatch and select green. You can change the quality of your green just over here if you were so inclined. Default bright green's just fine for me. And I am going to call this green blend. Cool. All right, so now I've got my green car. And what I'm going to do is move this back to 1. And I'm going to move it to here. Okay. Only thing I'm going to do a little bit differently with this dude for right now is I'm going to pick his vertices, move to the side, grab this, and just stretch him out. Now I could have just scaled him, but I liked where he was sitting, and besides it's something just a little bit different. So let's just say this is kind of like a truck, okay? As far as modeling the detail on them, we could do that later, but this is more for the real basic. Okay, so frame 1, they're just going to cross like that. So of course we have to give the truck the exact same animation because we want mayhem and destruction. Okay, so let's set a key. What axis are we moving on? We can do it by color. And again, we see that it's the blue axis. Once we select any of these axes, it turns yellow. But in our case, it's the blue axis, which is Z. As a matter of fact, you can just do that in your head. RGB, XYZ. Okay, so if it's the blue axis, we know that this is going to be the Z axis. So what I'm going to do is select the Z axis here, right-click on it, and key it. Okay, then I'm going to go to frame 120, and I'm going to drag this right down to there. Okay, and again, go back, and I'm going to right-click and key select it. Okay, so let's take a look. Oh, this is a Geico moment, ladies and gentlemen, where you have cars crashing into cars, and our big green tractor trailer truck is probably going to do the best. So what happens here is just horrible. Actually, blue looks like, well, blue clips the back of the truck, but it's a terrible accident, and we don't want this, okay? So what we want to do is be able to control either the truck and have him stop, or we could stop the two cars and the two traffic, and once the truck safely passes through, start them up again, which is kind of the way we're going to go. So what I'd like to do is get to the graph editor so I could actually see what I'm doing here. Now, multiple ways to get to the graph editor. We could either just go up to Windows and look for it here. We don't see it right off the bat. But what we do have is we have rendering editors and animation editors. And since we're talking about animation, there it is, the graph editor. Okay? And the graph editor is very handy, and we can just stretch it out. And since we have the green truck selected, we could hit F here, and there's his animation, okay? Or if we'd selected the red car, there's the red car's animation, and he's moving along. Another way we could do this, though, is use one of the preset layouts that are over here. In this case, if you go to the fourth one down with this icon, we tap that, what we get, and I can actually make this even a little bit handier for me, is this kind of a split window, okay? So let's take a look at this. Let's start with the red car. What I'd like to do here is I'd like the red car to be zipping along. What I'd like here is at frame, let's say frame 50, is to stop. Okay, I would like the red car to stop here, maybe frame 52. Yeah, let's say frame 52, I'd like the red car to stop there until the green car passes by. Okay, fair enough. How are we going to do that? Well, we did it the other day in class where I showed you, but if you weren't watching or if you forgot, a couple of things we can do. What we need to do is insert a keyframe. We need to give it a new directive because right now all it has is be at this point at this time and be at this point at that time. Okay? And at frame 52, we know it's going to be right here. So what I can do is I can select the curve, right click, and say insert a key. So now I have this time, okay? What I'd like to do is I want to see how long it needs to be there. So the green truck goes through, and let's say I wanted it to hold out until frame 75, okay? Because that gives it a little bit of time. So frame 75, I want my red car to continue to have been sitting there. All right, so over here, what I'm going to do, the time slider, move it to frame 75. Okay, if your curve is not selected, you can select your curve. We can right click in the viewport and insert a key. And there you go. The trick of this now will be that I need this value to equal this value. Okay, so there's a couple ways we can do that. We can try to eyeball it by selecting this key, tap the W key on the keyboard for move, and kind of try to move it up. Okay. If you're just moving this with the left mouse button, the only problem is it sort of can, move around in all sorts of directions. So another option you might have is if we Control Z to backspace or Command Z on the Mac, is that when I left click on this, is hold down Shift. And if I do that, it constrains it to vertical only movement. So you see in that case, that's actually pretty good. So what I want to do is I want to get it equal to that. So this is sort of the eyeball method of doing it, but what I can do then is I can select these two keys. I need to change how these handles are oriented so that I can get like a nice flat line between here. And what we can do is we can go over here to these tangent controls, okay, and then in this case what I want to do is I want to make them flat. You can see where they're a little bit different. Probably the simplest thing to do is going to be to figure out exactly what the value is here, and it is 5.837, and then take this one and say 5.837, and there you go. So now that makes this absolutely flat. So let's take a look at how that's going to work. So if we hit the move key, and red holds on and does a nice pause while he waits for the green truck to come. And then takes off like a bat out of hell. Okay. Let's do that for the blue. Okay, really quick. Here's the blue. You'll notice that a couple of things here. Blue is the first one we animated, and if you remember, we used the S key to keyframe it, and that lit everything up over here, which is why you have all these extra curves. We didn't do that on the green truck, and we didn't do that on this, which is why we have only one curve. So if you're going to use S and you're going to use your function curve, you're going to probably want to clean this up before you get in there. So in this case, what we're going to do with this object selected, we're going to go up to the Edit menu. We're going to go down to Delete by Type, and not History, and not Channels. Channels will remove all channels animated or not. we want to remove static channels. And what static channels are keyframed channels that actually have no change in them. So what we can do is we just tap that and then poof, we're back to the one curve, and this makes our function curve editor a much more pleasant place to spend a few minutes. Okay, so let's take a look. So this one, let's say, again, what we'll do is we'll let this guy go a little bit further just so it's a little bit off, maybe frame 52, right? Something like that, or frame 50. He's more conservative, so frame 50. So what I'm going to do is select this curve, I'm going to insert a key, he's going to take off. Also, let's just say that he's going to get into frame 80. This way it kind of offsets the performance just a little bit. So over here again, I'm just going to insert a key. The value over here of this, just so I don't waste any time, this one is minus 4.99. The value here needs to be minus 4.99. So tap that in, and the only thing left we have to do here is flatten out these two tangents. Okay, so during that bit, the car will sit perfectly still. So let's hit rewind and hit play and see what we get. And then they take off. And there you go. What I wanted you to do is do this with a couple of cars, maybe just kind of beef it up a little bit, play with it as a really brief introduction to start getting in control of things in Maya. Quite honestly, as far as keyframing, that is keyframing. Whether you were keyframing a monster and he was turning his head and stopping and then starting up and turning his head around the other way, or a tail or a bouncing ball, that's the process for keyframing. Controlling motion in Maya is very simple. If we want something to stay perfectly still, we want to see a flat line between the keyframes that we want stillness to occur in the curve editor, because across his time, up and down is change in value. So you can see that there's a value change or a movement on this object here, and although time is passing here, there's no value change, so the object's going to stay perfectly still. That's how you might have a character lunge up into a pose, stay in his pose, and then drop out of it or something. You'd basically use that exact same technique of bracketing or framing off keys so that there's no change in the value. All right? Hopefully that makes sense. The only other thing I'd like to change here is, just because it's neat, is let's say the blue car. You'll notice here that there's no ease coming out of this, and it looks like there's hardly any ease here, and the only ease we're getting is because of this. So what we could do is we could just add a little bit of ease to the front end of this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, and we can pick auto tangent or spline tangent. We'll just pick auto, it's fine. And again, grab this guy right here, and we'll set auto. And what we have, if you look at them now, is the red car, who also just starts off flat, will take off much faster and then perform the same. But if you watch B, he kind of speeds up, slows down, and then heads along and then slows down again. Not a particularly exciting animation, but hopefully it's functional enough and it gives you an idea of how the system works and how Maya works to empower you to be able to pull off a performance. Alrighty, my name is Brendan Gallagher, and if there's anything you'd like to know further, leave a message for me in the comments, and have a great day.